The story of seven brothers and a sister. Once upon a time, a king had seven queens. Six of the queens were arrogant and cruel, but the seventh and youngest one was gentle and kind. The other queens were jealous of her as the king favored her the most. For many years, the king was worried as none of the queens bore any children. Then one day the youngest queen was pregnant and the king was overjoyed. The entire kingdom started celebrating. The other six queens were eaten up with jealousy. The young queen was kept in a special room where she could have her baby in peace. But the six wicked queens assured the king that they would take care of her. The king went off to his court, leaving the six jealous queens in charge. After a few days, the young queen gave birth to seven beautiful little boys and one lovely little girl. The young queen was very weak and asked the other queens to show them. The wicked queens showed seven rats and a crab and screamed, "Look, this is what you have given the kingdom." The poor queen fainted with shock. The six wicked queens stuffed the little babies in 8 earthen jars and secretly buried them in a pile of ashes near the palace. After all these, they informed the king about the birth of his child. The king was highly excited and brought all his favorite courtiers to see his child. However, he was shocked and humiliated when he saw a whole lot of rats and crabs. The king banished the poor queen in a flaming rage, and the six wicked queens celebrated her disgrace. Peace left the kingdom that day along with the young queen. The palace was full of intrigue, and the king fell into decay. The sorrow of the young queen even broke the hearts of the trees and the stones. The rivers and the canals dried up, and the green fields grew dry and bare. The young queen supplied dry cow dung cakes to the palace for a leave-in and wandered around outside the palace. The palace fell in disrepair and no trees flowered in the palace gardens. There were no flowers now for the king's worship. At last, one day, the palace gardener came and reported to the king, "There are no flowers anywhere except on the palace ash heap where 7 Champa and 1 Parul tree grow, and each of these has a flower." The king said, "Then bring them to me so I may perform my rituals." As the gardener tried to pluck them, the little red Parul flower called out, "Awake, my 7 brothers Champa." Immediately the 7 Champa flowers replied, "Why do you call us little sister Parul?" And the bright red flower Parul called out, "The king's gardener has come. Will you give him flowers, everything you have got? Will you give him flowers, or would you rather not?" The brothers called out, we won't, we would rather fly. Away, away, up on high. Tell him to go, tell him to say, if the king should come, why then we may." The gardener was surprised. He ran back to the king and reported this marvel. The king, astonished, arrived at the ash heap to find the 8 beautiful trees. And as soon as he arrived, Parul called out, "The king himself has come. Will you give him flowers, everything you have got? Will you give him flowers, or would you rather not?" But the brothers called out, we won't, we would rather fly. Away, away, up on high. Tell him to go, tell him to say, if the eldest queen should come, why then we may. And all the flowers flew even higher up and away from the reach of king and his courtiers. Then the eldest queen arrived. Her jewelry was jingling. She reached to pick the flowers, but they rose even higher and said, Away, away, up on high, tell her to go, tell her to say, if the second queen should come, why then we may. In this way, one by one, all the 6 wicked queens were called, but no one could get their hands on the 7 Champas and their little red sister, Parul. Finally, the flowers rose so high they shone like stars in the sky. The king was agitated. What would he do? At last, they called for the king's maid, who picked up cow dung for the palace fires. A frantic search was set for the maid, and finally she was brought before the king. She was ordered to pick the flowers for the king's rituals at once. As soon as she reached up, the 7 little champa flowers and the 1 little red parul flower transformed into 7 sturdy little boys and 1 jolly little girl. And they all flung their arms around her and hugged her tight, shouting, "Mother, mother, mother!" The entire court was stunned. The king wept with bliss and grieved, all at the same time, and the 6 wicked queens trembled with dread. The king ordered to throw them into a pit and buried in thorns. The king returned to his citadel and re-established his young queen, his 7 sons and 1 daughter, and began to rule happily ever after.